our virtual open house for Lowndes High School. I am Miss Smith. I am your student's AP US Government and Politics teacher this semester. Just to give you a little bit of brief information about me, this is my 11th year teaching. I've been at Lowndes High School for 5 years, but I have taught this particular AP course for 7 years now, I believe. I love teaching this course. It's my absolute favorite one to teach, but in addition, I also teach U.S. history as well. I have a 1-year-old, a 1.5-year-old, so life is really busy, but really fun as well. So I want to give you a little bit of information about the course that your student is taking this year. So it's an AP course, which means at the end of the semester they will take an AP exam put out by a company called College Board, and if they make a certain score they could earn college credit for this course and not have to take this course again in college, which is really nice for students to be able to get ahead in college, and then also for the pocketbook as well for paying for the courses. So let me just give you a brief overview of what this course looks like, and then I'll talk to you a little bit more about the AP exam. So in this course we have 5 units, and I have them put up on the screen here for you, the title of each unit. So right now we're deep into Unit 1, Foundations of American Democracy. So we're looking at things like the first attempt at government under the Articles of Confederation. We've moved on to the U.S. Constitution and all of the things that entails and how our government is set up to run in a federalism system. We talk all about different parts of our republic or representative democracy that we have here in the United States and why our founding fathers set it up the way they did. So it's a pretty basics unit. Is like these are the basics of U.S. government, but definitely difficult because we read several documents written in the late 1700s, which make it definitely difficult for the students, but they can do it. Unit 2, we're getting into our 3 branches of government and how they interact with each other and how they're supposed to work together and sometimes don't work together very well, along with talking about the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. We also talk about the bureaucracy as part of the executive branch. Some people call it our 4th branch of government, but it's all those hired positions in the government. So we talk about, checks and balances and the different powers of each branches. And in this unit, we also read a few documents written in the 1700s, late 1700s, early 1800s as well, which again, pretty difficult, especially if your student is a freshman and this is their first AP course, but we will be able to walk them through it and they'll be successful. Unit 3, this is oftentimes students' favorite unit, civil liberties and civil rights, and so we're really focusing on the Bill of Rights and the amendments in the Constitution and how the Supreme Court has really kind of expanded on the interpretation or meaning of some of the laws of Congress and of the Constitution. So, we talk about those basic rights found in the First Amendment: freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. We talk about the Second Amendment rights. We do get into some things that may be a little more controversial, like pro-life versus pro-choice movement. But everything we talk about in this class is from an academic standpoint. It is definitely just, what does the Constitution say? What has the Supreme Court said over the years? Has that interpretation changed? I know students get interested and sometimes they want to debate, but for our course, it is definitely just an academic discussion of these liberties and rights that we have via the Constitution. But it's interesting. That's a lot of times students' favorite unit for sure. And with that, we'll talk about different movements as well. The original civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s. We talk about different versions of women's rights movement. There is a standard on the LGBTQ movement. But again, everything is from an academic standpoint. And it helps students understand, why the Supreme Court makes certain decisions that they do. over time in United States history. Now, Unit 4, this is my personal favorite unit. It's about American political ideologies and beliefs. So we talk about why Americans believe what they do about the government and what they think the government's role is in our lives. And so we talk about how people grow up learning from their families or, different parts of your life that really impact your political beliefs. So we'll talk about why different groups of Americans vote certain ways. And so again, super interesting to look at that. And then in Unit 5, this is all about political participation. So we talk about how citizens can get involved in the government, all the things that citizens can do to try to make an impact on the government. And so, of course, we'll talk about political parties, and again, everything is academic, and we'll talk about interest groups and just all these ways that we as citizens can really try to make an impact. Now, along with all of these units that we've been discussing, students are also required to learn about 14 Supreme Court cases. So there are, hundreds of Supreme Court cases that have been passed down over the years, but thankfully there's only 14 that they are required to know. And so sprinkled throughout these units, they'll be learning these 14 required Supreme Court cases. In addition to that, there's 9 what AP calls foundational documents that we have to read, and a lot of them are pretty heavy in Unit 1 and 2. So, for example, we've already read the Declaration of Independence. We've read the Articles of Confederation. We're currently studying the U.S. Constitution. There are several Federalist papers and one Anti-Federalist paper that we'll read. And so that's pretty heavy in Units 1 and 2 that we're reading these documents. And then when we get to Unit 3, there is a letter from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that we'll read in the Civil Rights unit. So, again, very difficult, but, we try to do a good job and make sure that students are really understanding what they're reading and how it applies to what they're learning. Now, along with everything that they're doing, in our course, we have a test for every unit. We have a quiz for every unit that students will take. And then, of course, there are, multiple daily assignments going on in each unit as well. Along with a quiz and a test for every unit, students have reading guides. So there's a textbook that they've all been issued at this point. We call it the AMSCO textbook, but this is the one that we use, so they all have one at this point. And I give them reading guides to read the chapters associated with our unit, and I try to stress this to them, but everything they're reading in the textbook is supporting the information that they're learning in class. And so when they're looking at the reading guides, I ask them, do not skim, read the textbook, and as you're reading, answer the questions. And so that's an assignment we have every unit. Along with that, we have something called a digital notebook for each unit that's on Google Classroom. And the notebook has a slide for every single standard that we learn in the unit. And so I encourage them, after we finish the standard in class, go that night to your digital notebook and go ahead and do the slide so that they're not trying to wait and do it all at once, at the end of the unit. And the students I have that score the highest on the AP exam have done these things with fidelity. They have been in class, listened, they've taken their notes, they've asked questions, they've read their textbook, done their reading guide, they've completed the digital notebook along with all the other activities that we do, and they're learning the material. They are hearing it in class, reading it in their textbook, and then at the same time applying it on that digital notebook. So they're getting the information in multiple ways at multiple different times, and that's really preparing them well for the AP exam. So I encourage your students to make sure that they're doing everything I'm giving them, and it is a lot of work. This course is definitely, a lot of work for sure. There's no way around that in an AP course, unfortunately, but that's what's going to help them score well in the AP exam. So let's talk about the AP exam. With the AP exam, it is on Monday, May the 6th at 8 a.m. Set date, that is when it is given all across the world. It has 2 sections to it. The first section is multiple choice questions, so students have 80 minutes to answer 55 questions. And this counts as 50% of the exam. So all of our quizzes and our tests in here are preparing them to answer those really difficult AP style questions. So for example, we have some quizzes coming up in Unit 1. It's always the most difficult quiz for students because it's their first time being exposed to real, true AP questions. But I do that for them so that they're prepared to do well on the AP exam. The other section of the test, the other half, worth 50%, is what we call FRQs, or free response questions. So with this, students have 4 free response questions they have to answer. The first 3 are more short response. So the first one will give them a scenario they've never heard of, and they have to apply their learning to it. The second one is usually some kind of data that they have to interpret. And then the third one is a Supreme Court question. This is why they have to learn those 14 Supreme Court cases that are required. The AP exam will give them a Supreme Court case they've never heard of and ask them to compare it or contrast it with one of the cases that they have heard of. And then the fourth FRQ is really an essay. It's called an argumentative essay. And in this essay, they're given a question. They have to take a side, develop a thesis, and they have to use one of our 9 required documents, at least one, could use multiple, to prove their thesis or to prove their side. These are definitely difficult, but throughout the year, I will teach your students exactly how to write each one of these, and we will have practice doing this, and they'll be well prepared. Now, how the AP exam scoring works, they take the test in May. They won't get their scores back until July. So in July, they'll get their scores back, and they'll make anywhere from a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So a 3 or higher is considered passing, like you've passed this college course pretty much. But not every college accepts a 3. It really depends on the college that you're going to. Now, every college will accept a 5. So if your student makes a 5, no matter where they go to college, they have a credit for this U.S. Government and Politics course. And I'll come out with a sign in August and put a sign in your yard, and it's a really exciting time. I have a board in my classroom with the pictures of all the kids who've made a 5, so that's what we're hoping for everyone. But a 3, a 4, or a 5 is definitely great. And again, it just depends on the college you're going to. Valdosta State, for example, will accept a 3, and most of your students are freshmen, and making a 3 on their very first AP exam is quite an accomplishment. Now, I told your students this globally, because this AP exam is given not just in the United States, but even globally, the passing rate for our AP exam is not great. I would say globally, it's somewhere maybe a little above 50% passing rate, which is really scary. But my passing rate at LHS is usually around 80%, which is really good. And I attribute it to all the hard work that your students put into it. So we're hoping to keep that up this year. And we want all of your kids to make 5, so for sure their college will accept it. But regardless, they're coming out of this class learning and knowing about the U.S. government and how it works and how sometimes it doesn't work and how we as citizens can participate and hopefully make it better, for sure. So that's just kind of all the information about the course. There is, and I'm going to show this screen to you, on my Google Classroom. You can look with your student if you want to. I have a course exam overview and then a course description. So if you're ever interested in what we're learning, this course description tells you all of the standards that I'm teaching your students. And students don't generally look at it, but it just kind of gives an overview of this is what you're expected to know on the AP exam. Also, the syllabus is on here as well. I know you guys had to sign the syllabus and send it back in, so you've probably already looked at it, but on the syllabus it details, classroom expectations, grading procedures, things like that. The AP exam will not count as a grade for the students because the scores don't come back until July, so they will have a final project that we'll do in May. Let's see, May 20th and 21st are our final exam days. So we'll do a final project, and that's 20% of their grade in our course. excuse me. If your students need tutoring, my official tutoring days are Monday afternoons and Thursday afternoons, but pretty much any day but Tuesday I'm here after school. So if they ever need to make something up, if they need some extra help, they know they can just make an appointment with me and stay. Students are expected to bring their Chromebooks every day charged. We do use our Chromebooks quite frequently in this course, along with, of course, their notebook and their notes that I give them and paper. And their textbook generally stays at home. We usually do our reading at home, but every once in a while I may send them out a message on Remind or an announcement on Google Classroom saying to bring their textbook for the day. So I just tell them to make sure they're signed up for our Remind and our Google Classroom. Speaking of Remind, if you are interested in signing up for Remind, I have the codes here on my syllabus. So there's the code for the Remind for AP Government. As a school system, we are moving to something called Rooms, which I think you'll be able to access through the Lowndes County Schools app. So once that goes live, then you can definitely contact me that way, or you can always send me an email, alyssasmith@lowndes.k12.ga.us. So, let me know if you think your student's struggling or if you have any questions or anything. Absolutely feel free to reach out. But I'm excited about this course. This is definitely my favorite course to teach. It is a lot of work, and I make sure the students know that, up front, but it's worth it to come out of this course hopefully with a good score on the AP exam and not have to take this course again in college, but just to be so knowledgeable about the government. And I know a lot of times teenagers don't really seem to care about, how the government works, but how vital is it to know those kind of things as they're getting into adulthood for sure. So hopefully your students will enjoy this course. I've told them that I can get them to a 3 on the AP exam. Everything I'm doing for them is going to be able to get them to that 3, but in order for them to get a 4 or a 5, it's on them. Like, they have to make sure they do the work with fidelity, and they come see me for help if there's anything that they're struggling with. But I have high hopes, and I'm excited to get to know your students even more throughout this semester, and just teach them all the fun things that is U.S. government and politics. And again, sorry we couldn't meet in person this year, but if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to email me, or once we get that Rooms communication system up and going, you can always communicate with me there. It was so nice to meet you guys virtually. Thanks.